So we are in Esther chapter 9 tonight. And tonight we're going to be talking about the day comes. And when we look at Esther chapter 9, we're going to start to see what it really means as far as the day comes. All right. So if you recall, here is Haman conspired to exterminate all the Jews in a single day. And he cast lots for when that day was going to happen. And so then the rest of the story of Esther plays out about how God used Esther to deliver the people. And by the way, you know, I've been saying that Esther is the only book in the Bible where the name of God is mentioned. Guess what? I was wrong. There is another. Anybody want to take a stab at what that other book is?
Song of Solomon?
Song of Solomon.
I just guessed.
Well, that was a pretty good guess. Yeah. So, you know, if you're ever thinking, hey, I really would like to tuck away a good question for Bible trivia, that would be it right there. You know, 2 books in the Bible where the name God is not mentioned, and it is Esther and in Song of Solomon. Okay? But kind of getting away from that, we see how God used Esther to deliver the Jews. And then, you know, we looked at how Haman was judged. We looked at how Esther and Mordecai were exalted. Mordecai was. But now we still are dealing with this idea about what is going to happen on this particular day in which the lot was cast. By the way, as far as the lot being cast for this day, the reason why Haman cast the lot for this day was to kind of put it in the hands of the gods for success. And although he really didn't understand what he was doing, can you kind of see that maybe God is using this day, but not how Haman intended it, but how God intends it? And, you know, the sovereignty of God is something that maybe we need to kind of remember, is that regardless of what people think, and regardless of what people do, and regardless of what people plan, God is always going to have His way and His will and do it in His timing. And so, you know, we can see that on this day. Okay? All right, so on the first 4 verses of Esther chapter 9, we see what happens on this day. It says, on the 13th day of the 12th month of the month of Adar. Oh, I need my glasses. Why do I always forget to bring my glasses? I need to have a little holder right here so I can just reach down and grab them, right? Okay. I was thinking as I was starting out, I was thinking, okay, I can do this, and I can do this, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I can't. Okay. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables were turned, and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities in all the provinces of King Xerxes to attack those seeking their destruction. No one could stand against them because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them, and all the nobles of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king's administrators helped the Jews because fear of Mordecai had seized them. Mordecai was prominent in the palace, and his reputation spread throughout the province, and he became more and more powerful. Okay, so we've got another timestamp here, and this timestamp is the one that the lot was cast and said at the very beginning, and that is the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. So going back, what we notice is that the time that Haman went and cast the lot was what? It was the first month, right? It's the 13th day of the first month, okay? And then when Mordecai, when we look back in chapter 8, when Mordecai went and wrote the edicts of saying, hey, the Jews can go and defend themselves, anybody remember when that was? It's the 3rd month. In fact, I think it said it was the 20th day. And so What's that? 23rd day, excuse me. Okay, so you can see that, we've got month 1, month 3. Now this is month 12. And so we're talking about an extended period of time has transpired in between when Mordecai sent those edicts out and by the time that it really comes around. Now, we've got a empire here that is stretching from India to Kush, Kush being down in Ethiopia. And so we have got a widespread territory. And it's not like, you can just, zip these out electronically and they're right there. I mean, these have got to be carried by carriers. And yeah, they are using fast horses. I mean, they said that as far as carrying the second edict out. But even still, how long is it going to take to get from modern day Iran over to India and all the way down to Egypt and get all the places figured out? Take a while, wouldn't it? But at the same time, I mean, you've got from 12th month to 3rd month, and so you've got 9 months there, a little bit under 9 months to work with. And so even assuming that it's going to take 6 months for all these edicts to get worked out, you still have several months for things to get processed, right? And so let's just say that it were to take 6 months. So, first edict goes out, annihilate the Jews. So they're going to be getting this in, let's say, month number 7, okay? And so what the enemies are doing is they're planning to attack the Jews. And don't you imagine that there's some persecution of the Jews that is already occurring and everything. And so then 2 months later, maybe even less than 2 months because they're on fast horses, then all of a sudden the other edict comes out of, hey, this one is written from Mordecai. Hey, who's Mordecai? Oh, he's a Jew. And he's second command who's taking the place of Haman. I'm sure that the dispatchers kind of told them all of that. And then, this edict says that the Jews can gather and defend themselves. And so if that's the case, then you still have several months there for the Jews to kind of work and assemble and everything like that, right? Okay, so first question, and that is from verses 1 through 3, what 2 things contributed to the Jews' victory? That's listed there, because we know God did, right? But from what's listed there, what are 2 things that contributed to the Jews' victories?
That other people were afraid of them.
Okay, other people are afraid of them. So we look at verse number 2, where it says that the Jews assembled in their cities and all their provinces of King Xerxes to attack those seeking their destruction. No one could stand against them because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them. One part of warfare, especially when you're talking about, physical warfare of like hand-to-hand fighting, it's got to be the motivation of the people who are doing it, right? And if you are scared and terrified of your enemy, then you're probably not going to have a good chance of success here. And so, one thing is that these enemies, and by the way, you gotta think that these enemies that are going and attacking the Jews, and the Jews are therefore defending themselves by attacking them, that these people are really truly hating the Jews. Because, if you're got the first edict and you're thinking, oh, I'm supposed to go kill the Jews, well, why? What did they do to me? If you got the second edict, what would you do? I never wanted to go in the first place, so I'm good to just sit this one out. But for the people who were like getting the first edict, yes, this is what I'm going to do. For them to actually go and do it, you can see that these are truly enemies of the Jews, right? Okay. All right, so there's one thing, and that is fear of the Jews. What's the second thing? The authorities helping them. Because we notice on down it says nobody could stand against them because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them. And then verse 3 it says all the nobles of the provinces, the satraps, governors, the king's administrators helped the Jews. And so all the people who are in the upper echelons of the government are thinking, you know what, we're going to aid the Jews. We're going to help them. Now, what kind of help they gave them, I don't know. I don't know if they gave them weapons or, what they did to help them out. But the other people there helped them, okay? And so this leads us to the next question, and that is, why did the people of the government help them?
Fear of Mordecai.
What's that?
Fear of Mordecai.
Right. So we look in verse number 3. It says that they did this because the fear of Mordecai seized them. So why were they fearful of Mordecai?
The palace. He got powerful.
He's powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, he is second in command to the king, and not only that, is his power is growing. And so those dispatchers that came with that second edict, and I'm sure the couriers talked about, the transition of power from Mordecai, that's the onset, but then probably as other things are coming and other edicts are coming in these next several months of what Mordecai is actually doing, then they're like, oh, wait a minute, this guy really is in charge. He's not just simply there appointed and we don't know if he's going to be there next week or month or not. I mean, this is a man who's there. He is in charge. He's making, orders. And so that's why these administrators are just kind of like, you know what, we've got to get on the right side of this. Because if we aren't, then we're in trouble. And so here's the fear of Mordecai seizing them. Mordecai said, the Jews can defend themselves. And so therefore, we need to go and we need to help the Jews in whatever way is possible. And then you can see that the people that are there assembling to attack the Jews, when they're realizing, hey, this is not good. This is not good. Then all of a sudden, the fear of the Jews are seizing them. And then all of a sudden, we have this defeat. Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody have any comments or questions on that?
Kind of quick how everybody changed.
Yeah.
It's like, well, follow the crowd.
When the Lord's involved, things can work pretty quickly, can't they? Okay. All right, so in verses 5 through 10, we see a little bit about what happens with all of this. And we see in verse number 5, it says, the Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. Now, by saying that they struck down all of their enemies, I don't think that means every single enemy that was there, every single person that hated them, because when we look at Ezra, and we look at Nehemiah, and we see the people that were opposed and enemies of the Jews there, Ezra and Nehemiah, portions of Ezra and then Nehemiah occurs after Esther. And so we can't say that every single one of them was wiped out. It's just that all the ones that came and attacked, wherever they were, those were the people that the Jews defeated. Okay? All right. It says in the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. And so, that's quite a bit, right? I don't know how many people lived in Susa, and I don't know how many people would have participated in this had not the second edict gone out. But, 500 people that were willing to go to war against the odds, against the Jews, that shows that, they have this very intense hatred. Now, among those killed, in verse number 7, they also killed, I'm going to do my best with these names, are Parshandatha, Delphon, Ashpatha, Portha, Adelia, Aridatha, Parmetia, Arishai, Aridai, and Vizatha. Okay. Man, I'm glad that Chloe's girl is a girl. I'm glad she's got her name picked out because, okay? All right, so here we've got these 10 sons in verse number 10. These are 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. And so here we've got these 10 sons, and, their father has been dead. Father's been dead for several years, but yet they're on the attack against the Jews. They're sharing in their father's evil zeal here. And as they go up against the Jews, we see that what happens is they get cut down too. Okay? And so here we've got Jews that are all over the kingdom that are being killed. 500 people in Susa. And so another question for you is, why was it wrong for the Jews to kill their enemies?
Well, they were protecting themselves,
Okay.
and they had, I don't want to say permission, but the direction that they could defend themselves
Right. Okay.
and not
Okay.
be wrong.
So from a moral standpoint, it wasn't wrong because it was in defense. Even though they were going on the attack, they were going against the attack, on the attack to people who were attacking them. And so from a moral sense, you can say, hey, they were well, within their rights. From a civil sense, they were within their rights as well because the king said, hey, you can do this. You can go defend yourself. What about from a spiritual sense? What do you think God thought about this?
I thought God was probably on their side.
Okay.
Because, I felt like all of this was God's direction, how He wanted things to go.
Okay.
So at this time, there was a prophecy in place for the remnant to return to Jerusalem. And how can they return if they're completely annihilated?
Right.
Like, it was God's plan originally for them to return to Jerusalem, and so this was His way of protecting them.
Okay. I agree with that. One thing that I thought of is that, we have to understand is that because of the covenant that God had with the Jews, that the people who are enemies of the Jews at this point are also enemies of God. Okay? And so just like in many other places in the Old Testament, God is using that to judge the people. And when you think about, well, why? What harm are they doing? Well, okay, what harm they're doing is because of their hatred for God is expressed with their hatred for the people of God. It's the same thing that Jesus talked about with His disciples as far as people hate me because they don't know the Father. Okay? And so when you don't know the Father, then therefore it's very easy for you to even if you're deceived, to carry out your hatred of God on the people of God. And so because of that, we see that God is judging. Now, does that mean, and are we excused today to just go out and wage war on our enemies? No. Why not? We're supposed to love our enemies because that's what Jesus did.
I don't know if this is the right answer, but it's a different time. It's a different picture, different group of people, different, that was the Old Testament, this is the New Testament. We're not the Jews. We don't have the same promises that God gave to the Jews. Like, there's just so many differences between what was going on then and what's going on with us now.
Yeah. I agree with that. I kind of think that, yes, it is, it's the same God. We're not talking about a different God, and we're not saying that God is one way in the Old Testament and another way in the New Testament. It's just that the way that God deals with humanity is different in the Old Testament than in the New Testament. And so in the Old Testament, God was enacting judgment upon His enemies at that time. In the New Testament, judgment is kind of deferred until after Jesus returns. And then judgment is going to be enacted all at once. And so it's not that God is not judging and not going to judge sin. It's not that he's being a double standard in taking care of things in the Old Testament one way. In the New Testament, it's going to be a different way. It's just that the judgment and the timing of the judgment and how it's enacted all at once, even in a spiritual sense, at the end of our age. And in the Old Testament, it was enacted, but it was enacted in a civil sense and with civil powers as well. Okay? All right. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say, if we were in their situation and they had a law that said you can go kill the Christians, I believe we would still be able to defend ourselves.
Well, okay, Carol, if an individual broke into your house and you had to use lethal force, you would be well within your rights, civilly, morally, everything like that. But for example, in the book of Revelation, where the civil powers are waging war against Christians, and Christians are having to hide and they're being persecuted and killed. It's almost like that's our destiny. And in that regard, to fight against it would really be kind of futile. And in that regard, in the end time, it would almost be like we're trying to stop something that God has decreed that would be happening, And at the end of the day, we need to realize, hey, Jesus was sacrificed and persecuted, and if that's what happens to us, then that means we're being like Christ. And I know that's not a very fun thought to think of, and hopefully that doesn't really happen to us. But if, let's say the United States government decides that they're going to carry out war against Christians, how are we going to even defend ourselves anyway? I've heard some people talk about, I would, that's why I've got a handgun to defend myself. Well, okay, it's hard to defend yourself, with a handgun when you've got an F-16 coming at you. Just saying. So.
Could you please explain how we have the moral right to sin?
What do you mean?
You keep saying you have the moral right to murder in defense.
No, I'm not saying.
If somebody attacks you,
yes,
and you have to use lethal force, you are well within your moral right to do that. That's what you said.
Yes.
Murder is sin.
That's not murder.
No, it's self-defense.
Murder is when you go and you take an innocent life.
Okay. Well, it says do not kill.
Well, in that context, we're talking about do not kill as far as unjustly, do not commit murder. Because when you look at the Old Testament is full of people killing, and killing in the name of God, doing it for God in this case. And so we can't really look at the Ten Commandments and say God said do not kill, but yet multiple times in the Old Testament God told the Israelites, hey, go and kill these people for me in judgment.
It doesn't say.
And Paul
It doesn't say cows.
But Paul says,
Are you allowed to kill cows? It says, thou shalt not kill. Are you also assuming it means don't kill cows?
No, I was just assuming humans.
Well, I think it's a safe assumption to say humans, but at the same
My point
time,
is there's more to it than don't kill anything.
there's context to it, and that is that we're talking about context of unjustly killing, taking the life of another human being. And when you look at the book of Matthew, you're even talking about something that's more than that. It's committing murder in your heart. Okay? But there is a difference between committing murder and, killing in the act of self-defense, killing the act of law enforcement, killing the act of war, so on and so forth.
It's a new different definitions of kill in the Hebrew language.
I don't know.
Okay, somebody told me that. Like,
Yeah,
It
Paul,
may be, but I don't know.
and Paul says it must lie within you, live at peace with all men.
Right.
So self-defense is, that's one thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, continuing on back to Esther. You know, I just kind of threw that question in there. I didn't think we would get very far with it, but I guess we did. Okay, starting in verse number 11, what we see is what happened at the end of this day. So in verse number 11, it says, the number of those slain in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and the 10 sons of Haman in the city of Susa. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, would he have known what would happen over in all the provinces? Because again, you don't have telegrams. You don't have telephones. You don't have... The only way he's going to have communication is by people coming and reporting to him, right? And so he's saying, hey, we've got these people that are killed in the city of Susa. What's happened in all the provinces? The implication there is if this has happened here, it's happened everywhere. And so, you know, the Jews are more than likely victorious in all of this. Now, notice what he says. He says, now what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? It will also be granted. You know, this is going back to what Esther had said at that banquet, what King said. You know, what is your petition? What is your request? It's going to be given you up to half the kingdom. Notice he doesn't even say half the kingdom here. He just says, what do you want? Okay? I think he kind of has an idea. And so what it says in verse number 13, if it pleases the king, Esther answered, give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this day's edict tomorrow also, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. Now, here's something. The 10 sons were killed that day. Why would you go and hang somebody who's already dead? As an example, in like updated NIV, it will say have them be impaled on a stake, okay, instead of hanged on the gallows. When we read that word hanged on the gallows, when I read it, I'm thinking that they're taking them and hanging them from their neck on a gallows, right? The word gallows, I don't know about murder and kill, but I do know gallows is just simply wood. Period. You know, wood. And so based on what the customs were in Persia, it was probably taking the dead bodies and impaling them on stakes, like what Chloe said, as an example. And so, no, we're not killing people who have already been killed. It's taking these 10 people and impaling them for an example of everybody else. Okay? And so what it says, going on down, well, before we get into that, here's another question for you. Why do you think Esther wanted to continue things for another day? God's plan? Evidently it was. Do you think that maybe she understood the degree of the hatred that was out there? You know, maybe she's been having people report to her and saying, you know, there are thousands of people out there that want to harm us. And so when she's getting word back, 500, she's thinking there are more people that are out there. And so she's thinking, you know, let's take these 10 sons of Haman, let's impale them to make an example out of them, and let's continue this another day so that we can just simply put this matter to rest and get over it and done with, so that we don't have to have the danger of people trying to kill us anymore. That's what I think. Okay? But why do you think she didn't request it for the other providences? Can't get it out that fast. And you don't know what happened to the other providences, do you? Okay? I mean, she's familiar with Susa because she lives there. But if she says, get it out everywhere, well, then you've got problems because, like you said, Chloe, you can't get it out that fast, right? But at the same time, it could be that in other providences, it's not really needed either. She just simply knows about Susa. Okay? All right, so in verse number 14, we see this. It says, so the king commanded that this be done. An edict was issued in Susa, and they hanged the 10 sons of Haman. The Jews in Susa came together on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they put to death in Susa 300 men, but they did not lay hands on the plunder. And so what we see is that, yeah, there's some people in Susa that second day that are still willing to fight, even though they saw what happened the day before. And so if you think about that hatred that is still present and still there, okay? Now, did you notice there at the end of verse number 15, it says they did not lay hands on the plunder. This is actually the second time that it said it, and they're going to say it a third time. And so another question for you is just simply this. Why do you think the Jews didn't plunder their enemies?
Wasn't the point.
What's that?
Wasn't the point.
Okay. Wasn't the point to take their stuff?
And make them like their enemies.
I'll make them like their enemies? Okay.
Because the enemies were plundering,
All right.
or set to plunder.
Do you remember in the Old Testament when the Israelites were coming into the land of promise? Do you remember a man named Achan? And do you remember Achan's sin? What was Achan's sin?
He took their idols and all their possessions and he hid them in a pit in his tent.
He took their stuff. Going against what God wanted and going against God's command. Why do you think God did not want the Israelites to take any of their stuff? Well, the idols, and not only that, but he wanted it all to be a sacrifice to him. He did not want any, it's not like Marge, what you're saying, of the Israelites going in and then plundering and then enriching themselves off of what they did instead of realizing, hey, we're doing this because God wanted us to do it, right? And so I think that this is one reason why they didn't plunder any of their enemies, is because they realized, hey, this has larger spiritual implications. This is enemies of God attacking the people of God, and therefore what we want to do is we want to, just leave all the material possessions behind, and we just simply want to do what God wants us to do.
Well, I think especially when we were talking about they were defending themselves. How can you go in and say, well, we were just defending ourselves, but we thought we'd take, a lot of gold and stuff. So
Right.
it kind of takes away from what we were just saying that, they
It
weren't
does.
going in just to murder them.
It does. So, okay. What we see in verses 16 through 18 is what happens everywhere else. So it says in verse 16, meanwhile, this is not meanwhile like on that next day. This is meanwhile as far as the day before. It says, meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also assembled to protect themselves and to get relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of them, but did not lay hands on their plunder. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made a day of feasting in joy. Okay? All right, we are going to stop there. Oh, well, going down verse 18, the Jews in Susa, however, assembled on the 13th and 14th, and made the 15th day they rested and made a day of feasting and joy. Okay, we'll stop there. Anybody got any more questions and comments about things?
one point to the defense of oneself. In Luke 22, I think it's 35. I looked at it, I forgot the verse now. Christ even tells the disciples to go and get swords right before he's taken by the authorities, and he tells them like, it's coming for me, but I mean, there's only one other reason to make sure that they have swords when you know that there's going to be an attack just for their own defense.
And in that passage earlier, Jesus said, don't have any swords. Because he was with them and he was going to be their protector. And then, but with his death on the cross, they didn't have that. But when you look at the book of Acts, when you had government authorities, and there's the key, government authorities coming, they just simply submitted to the punishment. They never fought back, is what I'm saying. When the authorities came and arrested Paul, it's not like he fought back. Now, he did use and exercise means of his legal defense in the book of Acts. But when the Roman soldiers came and took him, he didn't fight back.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between the powers the government as God has set them over us and just defense from evildoers.
Right.
In that nature.
Right.
And somebody breaking into your home to kill or to...
Well, let's just hope that never happens. But, if it does, as far as morally, spiritually, legally, you have rights of self-defense. Okay. We will stop there, and Lord willing, we'll finish up next week. All right? Okay. Let's pray. Dear Lord in heaven, we thank you for everything you've given us. We thank you for your blessings, and we thank you for giving us this time in your word tonight. We ask that you please give us wisdom. Please give us understanding. Help us to understand what you've said so that we can please you better. Lord, we ask that you please be with us in the rest of the week. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.